While war is a grim affair, almost every country in the world maintains its own armed forces to ensure security when needed. Countries like Russia or North Korea often emphasize their formidable defense capabilities. However, in today's episode, we will showcase countries where the military is typically not seen as a threat to others. Enjoy watching. Number 10. North Macedonia, a small landlocked country on the Balkan Peninsula, has just over 2 million inhabitants. The country allocates approximately $108 million annually to its military, representing only 0.85% of its annual GDP. This is significantly lower compared to the average defense expenditures of European Union countries, which stand at 1.3%. In comparison to the United States, which allocates a substantial 3.4% of its GDP to defense, North Macedonia's budget appears modest. It's worth noting that this country was once heavily conflicted with neighboring Albania. Nevertheless, despite historical tensions, North Macedonia maintains a relatively small budget for military purposes. Despite this limitation, the Army of the Republic of North Macedonia has some resources in both the land and air forces. Due to the lack of access to the sea, North Macedonia does not invest in warships but possesses 14 transport helicopters and 4 attack helicopters. The total number of soldiers in the army is 13,000, with 5,000 being reservists. This provides an interesting perspective on the defense capabilities of this state. Number 9. Bosnia and Herzegovina, a European country, organized its armed forces during the 1992 war. The need for rapid mobilization and limited access to supplies resulted in the army being composed mainly of ordinary citizens and recruited members from various criminal gangs. Despite reforms introduced in the early 21st century, the situation did not significantly improve. Although Bosnia and Herzegovina has a small strip of coastline measuring only 19 kilometers, it lacks a navy or naval vessels. The country's air forces consist of only 19 helicopters, with an emphasis that none of them is actually intended for defensive purposes. The defense of the country relies primarily on the land forces, numbering 10,500 soldiers. Despite these limitations, Bosnia and Herzegovina allocates significant financial resources to maintain its army, spending the equivalent of $165 million annually from its budget. This amount has attracted public attention in recent years, prompting questions about the efficiency of expenditures. In 2012, there were even calls for the abolition of the armed forces in response to suspicions of financial mismanagement. Number 8. Suriname. Over the past 40 years, Suriname has not only experienced one but 2 coups d'etat, as well as a civil war that resulted in the breakdown of military institutions. Despite having a population of 600,000 people, Suriname's armed forces consist of 1,850 soldiers, which is not bad. However, there are serious issues with equipment shortages. The country faces a lack of military boats, aircraft, and even vehicles. Additionally, the existing equipment is old and non-functional. Currently, the air forces of the Surinamese army have only 3 helicopters, which is a small number. The Navy and Coast Guard had only 3 patrol boats purchased in the 70s for a long time. However, by 2010, they were so outdated that they became practically unusable. Suriname's military equipment relies on donations from other countries, and the defense budget is $63 million annually. This is clearly insufficient even to consider the purchase of a decent fighter jet. Number 7. Somalia. Since 1991, Somalia has been embroiled in a civil war, making the organization of the national army extremely complicated. Although Somalia officially has an active army of 20,000 personnel, this is relatively small compared to a population exceeding 15 million. The high level of internal conflicts results in an increasing number of civilians being conscripted into the armed forces. The Somali military has only 100 armored vehicles and 10 tanks. Unfortunately, it is often engaged in conflicts with armed civilians rather than focusing on defending borders. This places Somalia in a very disadvantageous position, exposing it to attacks from neighboring states. This situation underscores the difficulties in maintaining stability and security in the country, with far-reaching consequences for its citizens. Number 6. Bhutan, a kingdom located in Asia, is more renowned for its monks and monasteries than for powerful armed forces. This small country, with an area of 24,000 square kilometers, boasts only 7,000 soldiers. The lack of access to the sea means that Bhutan doesn't require naval vessels, but nonetheless, it possesses 2 helicopters and 27 armored vehicles. What sets Bhutan apart is its modesty in the realm of armaments, focusing more on spiritual heritage than military might. Despite having limited military resources, the country maintains a certain capability for intervention when needed, which can be crucial in maintaining regional stability. Number 5. Costa Rica, despite initial surprise, has functioned without its own armed forces for over 70 years. After the conclusion of the tragic civil war in 1948, the army was dissolved to ensure that government forces would never again be used against the country's own citizens. Instead of a military, Costa Rica established something known as the Costa Rican Public Forces, which include units such as the Civil Guard and the Air Surveillance Service. This organization focuses on maintaining public order, enforcing the law, and serving as a border patrol. It comprises 12,000 officers. An interesting aspect is that the lack of military funding has become an advantage for Costa Rica. Not having a military eliminates the need to spend resources on training and purchasing weapons. As a result, Costa Rica can allocate over 7% of its GDP to education, which is significantly more than Poland, which allocates just over 5% of its total budget for this purpose. This approach allows for directing greater resources towards societal development and education. Number 4. Panama, taking inspiration from Costa Rica, decided to abolish its armed forces in 1990. Despite its strategic position, hosting a significant waterway, Panama took this step while being under the rule of dictatorship for many decades. The Panamanian government dissolved the army, replacing it with the Panamanian Public Forces, which include the police, air service, navy, and border patrol units. In a population slightly exceeding 4 million people, Panama has managed to maintain only 10,000 active soldiers. Despite being situated along one of the most important waterways globally, their navy consists of only 33 units, with 16 of them being patrol boats. This approach has allowed Panama to focus on other areas of development and allocate resources to different priorities, eliminating the need to maintain a full-fledged military. Number 3. Mauritius, located in the Indian Ocean, is primarily known for its beautiful beaches and coral reefs. Despite having one of the strongest economies in the sub-Saharan Africa region, this island nation with a population of 1,200,000 has no neighboring countries that could pose a potential threat. Therefore, Mauritius sees no need to establish a regular or reserve military force. Despite the absence of full-fledged armed forces, Mauritius maintains a police force consisting of just 12,500 officers. It's worth noting that the country's focus is primarily on tourism, rather than potential defense against external threats. The total defense budget of Mauritius is only $22 million, representing just 0.15% of the country's total GDP. This reflects the country's priorities, where the main challenge lies in attracting tourists and developing the service sector. Number 2. Luxembourg. This small country, situated at a significant crossroads between France, Germany, and Belgium, is home to around 600,000 people, with over 40% being foreigners. The lack of access to the sea means that Luxembourg does not have a navy. Nevertheless, Luxembourg maintains a small air force, currently consisting of at least 2 multi-role helicopters. The entire volunteer army of Luxembourg consists of 939 individuals, and this number includes not only soldiers. In this group of just under 1,000 people, there are 137 civilian employees, 81 officers, and 54 musicians. This unique approach to military structure reflects Luxembourg's character as a neutral state with a small population and limited resources. Number 1. Iceland, despite being a member of NATO, has not had its own army since the late 18th century. This prosperous and pacifistic country provides financial support and personnel for NATO. In return for its contribution, NATO member states guarantee the presence of military personnel in Iceland on a rotational basis. This means that every soldier stationed in Iceland is essentially a temporary armed guest. Iceland allocates only 0.07% of its GDP to its small armed forces. This symbolic amount mainly funds the Coast Guard, consisting of about 120 individuals. This approach underscores Iceland's unique situation as a country that has forgone its own army in favor of international support. The question of whether every country should have its own army elicits various opinions. Your perspective on this matter is interesting to me, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. That's all for today. See you in the next episode.